So I do want to ask a little bit about that. And, I feel like things change a lot week to week. We're sort of all about a month or so, depending on where you are geographically, um, into this quarantine. And we've heard various things about like who's open for business, who's investing and all that. And I just want to take a chance. If each of the panelists could sort of introduce themselves and their firms, but just give me like a one sentence snapshot of like, where are you guys now as a firm in terms of, are you still mostly focused on internal portfolio? Have you taken new pitches yet? Andrew, why don't you start us off?
Great. Can you hear me, Charlie?
Yes.
Great. Yeah, it's a good question. So we're definitely open for business. In fact, I looked back. I've been asked this question several times.
And who are you? And what is your firm?
Yeah. Okay. Great. So I'm Andrew Cleland. I'm a partner with Comcast Ventures. I've been with Comcast Ventures for about 9.5 years now. And before that, I was a partner at Time Warner Investments, focused mainly on enterprise software and data-related investments. So Comcast Ventures has very much been open for business. I look back over the last 3 weeks or so, we've closed 6 deals in that time. So actually more active than usual. The difference for us is that a lot of those deals were already in process before the crisis hit. So it was very important for us reputationally that we didn't back out of any processes that we were already in. We have an institutional memory. We know that others have institutional memories. We didn't want to renege on anything. We wanted to make sure that we stood behind the handshake deals that we had. The difference for us is, I think with the new normal, there's this incredible period of uncertainty. So we are just as active as we've always been. We are taking new deals. We are taking second meetings. The question for us that we haven't come to full resolution on is, can we commit to a larger size check without ever having been in the same room as the entrepreneur? That's a difficult one for us. And I think there are different views around the table, and I think the answer changes depending upon the size of the check. So I think we could get comfortable writing smaller checks under those circumstances, probably less comfortable writing larger checks.
And just realistically though, I mean, we're only sort of a month into this quarantine. The deals that you were just closing probably were going to take longer than a month anyway, from like first meeting to founder to actual check cashed, right? So it's not surprising that there aren't many deals that started and ended during this quarantine, because that would be pretty quick under any normal circumstances.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I think the difference is conversations that we've started since the crisis, we don't know when they're going to end. And I think there is a variety of different opinions on that. I personally would say I could get comfortable writing a seed stage check under these circumstances. I think the process needs to be a little bit different, but I personally would be uncomfortable, say, writing an $8 million check without ever having broken bread with the entrepreneur, let's say.
Gotcha. Nikhil, do you feel somewhat in the same boat? And if you could also do the firm intro, that'd be great.
Yeah, for sure. Hey everyone, I'm Nikhil at Shasta Ventures, early stage focused firm based here in San Francisco. And I think we think very similarly to what Andrew said. We've made one new investment since shelter in place, so in the last month. But that conversation had started before the pandemic was declared. And the honest truth is, when new investments were maybe priority number 1 or priority number 2 before the pandemic, new investments have become priority number 4. Portfolio companies have become priority number 1. Stuff inside the firm, communicating with our LPs, priority number 2, and new investments, down the stack. In the middle of all that is, of course, all of us thinking about our own health and the health of our founders and the employees at our portfolio companies. So the prioritization stack rank has just changed.
Sure. Monica?
Yeah, so I'm at Kleiner
Oh, I
Perkins.
actually thought you were outside there for a moment. That was really,
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the virtual background. So yes, I'm at Kleiner Perkins. I've been here for the past year and a half. The firm is focused on early stage, kind of Series A with a bit of B, a bit of C and a bit of Series B. And I'm focused on fintech and consumer personally. We have also made kind of 2 investments. So we closed our most recent fund March 5th, so right at the beginning of this. And so we've made 2 investments out of that so far. Both to that point have been from, processes that began prior. So we're now starting to see our first companies come through the partnership that are, really the whole process has been run through this. I think there is hesitation around this like online version, but I think it's also just trying to understand, what the short and long-term effects of quarantine, and not just quarantine, but what is happening in the world right now are, both in terms of there being, economic impact, and then also just this is a huge shift in the way people work, a shift in how healthcare is delivered, everything. So we're trying to wrap our heads around that, and definitely to Nikhil's point, there is a ton of, and I think this is really what marked the first month was a ton of efforts with portfolio companies, internal LPs, all of that, to try to make sure that everything was sorted there before we could even begin to take these calls now.
Angus, would you agree that the idea, I'm getting the sense that the last month has been more sort of inward focus. Is most of that work internally in your firm? I mean, obviously you're always still monitoring and changing situations, but would you feel like of the bulk of that work, at least figuring out what the plan is for each portfolio company, whatever, is mostly behind you as a focus of the firm? And firm intro as well.
Sure. Quickly, and I'll put up my contact information. Anyone wants to contact us. I've got the virtual background. I'm in the office today, if you haven't figured that out. No, I think that's right. I think especially for our portfolio companies that were going through really acute challenges, some of that stuff is behind us. So, large layoffs or things like this for firms that might have been for companies that might have been especially exposed to the, for example, travel space as one example. That said, I think, as Monica was alluding to, there still remains a lot of uncertainty around what other sectors that are less obvious, how they will be affected, how deeply, and for how long. So I think that to a certain extent that inward focus remains. The pace of communication with our management teams across the portfolio has certainly picked up.
Monica, you alluded a little bit to